Hello and welcome to the Struggles to Success podcast, the podcast which helps you use struggles to become better, stronger, and more successful. Struggles are in fact gifts, and on this podcast we share stories and lessons from people who have experience of turning struggles into success. A wise person learns from their own struggles, and even wiser person learns from other people's struggles. I am your host, Dr. Emmanuel Sutebu, and author of the book, From Struggles to Success. Your struggles can make you better, stronger, and more successful. I am extremely excited today to welcome our special guest, Mr. René Awambeng. You're very welcome.
Hi, good afternoon, Dr. Emmanuel Sutebu. Thank you very much for inviting me to your podcast. I would want to first of all congratulate you for a number of things. The first one is for having authored a book on success, how your struggles can make you better, stronger, and more successful. I think as a medical professional, for you to actually get out of your comfort zone to write a book on success is very important and something that other people should emulate. The next thing I want to congratulate you on is actually having set up this podcast, because it's a way of documenting and keeping records, not only for this generation, but for future generation of people, to be able to learn and understand so many things about our society and culture. And the third thing I want to congratulate you about is actually the celebration of success. Because we come from a culture where people don't celebrate success. We celebrate cry die. You know what that means, coming from a cultural background in Cameroon, which means when you pass away, people come with flowers in your funeral, and they bring all types of ceremonies, entertainment, dances to celebrate you. When you were alive, nobody celebrated you. When you passed away, that's when they're celebrating you. We have to encourage this culture of celebrating success, so that we can inspire and instill and motivate other people to learn and improve on themselves around success. So thank you very much for giving me this opportunity to engage.
Thank you. And thank you for those really kind words. I really appreciate it. And I'll segue nicely with what you just said to celebrate your success and to highlight the award which you were given last month, which is a very prestigious award. It's the Global Executive Leader Award at the Powerful Media's Powerlist Black Excellence Awards for 2024. And it's the award for the most influential people of African origin, African American or African Caribbean heritage, that have made a difference really across the board. It was an award that was given in London. It was at Buckingham Palace and awarded by the King Charles III. It's an award which is sponsored by London Exchange, and it recognizes the outstanding leaders based outside the UK who have demonstrated exceptional vision, innovation, influence, and have had transformative impact on their organizations. So it's an award which really demonstrates people who have the ability to positively alter events and change lives, as demonstrated over a meaningful period of time. A very prestigious award, and we are really want to say congratulations to you for having achieved this and being awarded this prestigious recognition.
Lord, thank you very much for your very warm compliments and wishes further to the Global Executive Leader Award that was bestowed on me by His Majesty King Charles III of the United Kingdom of Great Britain. This award is a recognition of the hard work that been put together over the last 30 to 40 years. And it's a recognition of success, but I take it with a lot of humility because this success doesn't come without challenges. To be successful in anything you do, you go through a lot of struggles, but those struggles only make you stronger and make you more successful. And I can say that in my career and my life, I have been through these challenges and difficult moments. For example,
with that, I wonder whether you give me a chance to highlight, as way of introduction, also some of your background, because I think it will set the scene for the challenges that you're just about to mention. The first is to highlight the fact that at the moment you're working as a director and global head of client relations at African Export-Import Bank. And you've been doing that since 2016. And you've already generated over $8 billion in terms of revenue and over $50 billion in terms of loan assets across Africa, and working across continents, Africa, the Caribbean, Middle East, and Europe. In addition to that, you're also at the moment doing a lot of charitable work. First as your founder and board member of the Awambeng Renal Care Foundation, which you set up yourself, and also former board member of the African Sepsis Alliance, which I also chair as president of the African Sepsis Alliance, and you've contributed significantly to the work of the African Sepsis Alliance, and president also of the SME Trade and Business Commonwealth Entrepreneurs Club. And that's your charitable work. Before you moved to African Export-Import Bank, you spent 19 years with EcoBank for Cameroon, Democratic Republic of Congo, and Rwanda. And then you moved into the role as group head of global corporates, regional corporates, and commodity finance, corporate and investment banking with EcoBank. You were with them for 19 years. So that's a very powerful background really to introduce you. And most people would hear that and look at your achievement with the award you've had recently and not understand all that you've gone through. And every successful person has a journey. And most successful people have that skill of using a struggle to become more successful. And so I'll come back to you and say, has your journey been a walk in the park? Tell us how you've got to where you've got to now. How did you achieve that, and how did struggles help you?
No, Dr. Suitable, thank you. You didn't mention that also I was a family man and a father of an 18-year-old daughter. So
most important. Most important.
Most importantly. So yeah, it's been a long, tough journey to get here. And I don't think this is the end of the road. There are sort of challenges that come with success and recognition. The first one being the work-life balance. Balancing a successful professional career and maintaining a personal life or a family life is very challenging. The demands of this success require significant time and energy to sustain both your family, both your personal life, and your work demands. This also comes with stress and pressure. Success brings additional responsibilities and expectations, leading to stress. And as you very well know, I have been, I don't know if it's to say victim, or I have been in this situation where in 2020, after a prolonged uncontrolled blood pressure, I was diagnosed with stage 5 renal disease. I had to go through a kidney transplant. Successfully got a sister of mine to donate an organ, which is very grateful, thankful to her for that, for giving me that opportunity to continue to live and go through that challenge and that struggle, which didn't end there. Getting the kidney was not the end of the journey, because after the transplant, I had a COVID and my organs failed in November 2020 in a reputable medical institution in the UK. And I had to be kept in a protective coma, an induced coma, for the last 6 months. As a medical practitioner yourself, you know how difficult and challenging this was. At a time when the world was actually shut down, most people thought I was actually dead. But by the miracle of God, I came back and he gave me a second chance. So these are some of the pressures that come with a successful working business life. Success has also brought high expectations, and others have very high expectations of you, which can be stressful and make you try to live up to standards. People have demands, whether it's friends, family, business partners, stakeholders, all have high expectations and demand of you to deliver, you know. And on this journey, you have to constantly also educate yourself, learn, adapt yourself to environments to stay successful. You have to continuously improving on yourself, learning. Over the last 30 years, I've been re-engineering myself to be able to keep the struggle and successful, you know, with the risks of burnout. You know, this week alone, I don't know how many air miles I've clocked, but this week I've been in Europe, I've been in the US, I've been in the Caribbean, back to Cairo, and currently in the UAE. I'm flying out again in another 3 hours to meet other engagements in Cairo tomorrow, and off again on Tuesday to Moscow. So it's a very tough journey, you know. It's a very tough journey with a lot of burnout. And if you are not careful, if you don't set yourself something around self-care and setting boundaries, it might be even risky to your health. And then the loss of privacy, you know. You no longer have a private life when you are somebody who is in the open space. You become more public, and it's very difficult for you to navigate, you know. Everything that you do is in a public space, which creates both criticism, and I like criticism. I love positive criticism, because the only way I can improve is by taking criticism from people, positive criticism, to improve on myself. But it also brings haters and the consequences of that. Success also, to me, one of my biggest struggles is the fear for failure. I see myself as a role model for thousands and thousands of young men and women across the world, not only in Africa, Europe, and the Caribbean, people who look up to me. And I think I do not want to fail them. I do not want to destroy the vision that they have. So it fuels me to keep on driving, to strive to deliver on them. And maintaining success also is also very challenging. Over the last 30 years, I can say that I have moved from one challenge to another one, which is, I say to people, I'm like the comeback king. I moved from one challenge to another one. You know, in my very early days, I went to primary school in a very renowned school in West Cameroon, PNU in Bota. I was very privileged. My father put me through that school, and my parents put me through there. So, very privileged, fundamental backgrounds, which the right values for growing up instilled in me from my early days. Went to Sacred Heart College, Mankon Bamenda. Unfortunately, in 1979, my father had an accident and couldn't continue to support or sustain. And I started seeing struggles right when I was in class 3, class 4, class 5 in secondary school, where even to pay my fees in secondary school was a challenge. And I had to be tossed from one uncle to another one, you know. I have a brother who today is still struggling because he used to sit on the table with his own cousins, and people would drink tea with milk and he would not have milk and sugar. And that's how we grow up because of those challenges. But we only built on those struggles to improve ourselves. You know, by the time I was in high school, I was working professionally in the family business. I already embedded myself in the family. I learned skills to be able to help myself navigate those challenges in life. By 20, I was production manager. I was using the first computers that were out, Macintosh computers. I had like 10 computers in my bedroom. I was production editor for Cameroon Post, the leading opposition newspaper, when I was 20. By 21, because of that resilience between the early ages of 13 to 20, I had already sponsored my kid sister to go to the UK to study. So that just shows you how I learned from each situation. And due to the circumstances around pro-democracy in Cameroon, the government at the time forced Cameroon Post into liquidation. And I was in a very difficult situation. I successful in university, Yaoundé, while working there. But after I finished university, and Cameroon Post was now bankrupt, literally bankrupt, I had to find something else to do. And one day I was traveling between Yaoundé and Douala, and reading a local newspaper, Cameroon Tribune. They advertised a job for $100 to work as an admin assistant in British Council. I took this job. Again, resilience and move struggling from one situation to another one. And that's how I found myself in the British Council. And a few years after, I found myself as a chief evening scholar by the Foreign and Commonwealth Office to go to the UK to do a master's in business administration in the University of Nottingham. And a few years after, I was a junior professional program in Standard Chartered Bank in the UK. And a few months after, I was back in Cameroon as deputy director of British Council. By 25, I was already a deputy director. The transformation in my life was incredible, but it came from the resilience and the challenges of my very early days. And working in that public service international organization kind of environment, I saw myself more like an entrepreneurial person, and I had to move on back to banking. And built a very successful Pan-African banking career, pioneer career, at a time when banking was expanding Pan-African banking across Africa. I contributed to that discussion and that debate significantly, helping me to build networks and relationships across the whole of the continent, culminating in me setting up a business in the UK for my previous employer in 2011. And successfully built that business until I joined my current employer. So it's been a struggle from one success to another one, from one challenge to another one. And across those times, it's not been an easy journey, you know. I can tell you my time as country director of, I remember setting up commercial banks in different countries. There are different experiences and different challenges. Whether it's in Zimbabwe, it's in Rwanda, in the DRC, in Chad, in Republic of Congo, different challenges that we had to overcome, political, economic, you know. I remember landing in the DRC for my first time, and on a flight around 5 p.m. on Heraboa. And the guy said, I had gone to Chad, and the ambassador had put a 1-year visa in my passport. And the immigration people said to me, why do you have a 1-year visa? We can't let you in. And I said to them, well, I don't issue visas. Your embassy gave me the visa. And we had a bad affair. I stayed at the airport till 11 p.m. when they were closing the airport. And that's how they let me in from 5 p.m. in the evening to 11 p.m. But resilience, I refused to budge. And I went into the country and went to the airport. The first guy I saw was driving an old Mercedes car. I ended up recruiting this guy. He charged me $50 to carry me to the city. And I went to the hotel and they said that my reservation had expired. And I had to sleep in the guest quarters of the staff quarters of the hotel for that night. And then I ordered a drink, the Coke, it was $7. And I ordered a pizza, it was $36. So, and around 2 a.m., I went to bed. I called my boss. I said, look, we don't need to do this business plan. We just have to open the business. The fundamentals are right for setting up the business. So, and I took 2 years to get the license, get the approvals, and we set up that business. It's a successful business today, making an EBITDA of over $25 million. So those challenges have always been there. And I remember again how I moved from Africa to Europe. I had been going through all the challenging countries in Africa. I went to Zimbabwe and I did an acquisition. I was expected to take a year to do it. I took probably 2 weeks to do that acquisition. And my boss now called me and said, at the eve of Christmas, he said, you need to write the business plan for a commodities business. I didn't know what the commodities was. And he said, you need to set up a business plan. And I was dabbling around. And he called me again a few days after. I said, you seem to be struggling. So he said, you speak to this guy and he'll help you. So I finally wrote something with one guy and went to the board actually the board meeting was in the Philippines, presented. They said, you present with so much passion that there's nothing in your paper, but you have to go ahead and set up the business. Gave me the option of Paris, London, and Geneva. And 2 weeks after, I went back and I was still sitting on my desk in Africa, and he called and said, are you crazy? You have to go and set up this business. So I went to Paris and I went to BNP Paribas and had my suits and tie and working there and said, we're going to set up a business. And the guys in BNP said, you see, René, you can't do this. It's not for people like you. It's not going to happen. But I learned from them. I went to the field. I went from South Africa to Algeria, all the countries on the African continent, to try to understand what commodities were. Soft commodities, the category of soft commodities, mining commodities, oil and gas commodities. I built good knowledge through the help of a friend who was also in Geneva. Right. And I can tell you proudly that today, if you want to count a few people on the continent who understand the commodity business, I'm one of them. But it all came from those struggles of saying it can be done. And even with the knowledge again there, we built a very successful business. And in 2016, I was approached by, but why all this? This comes from the fundamental values that were instilled in us from our humble beginnings. We come from very humble origins, We come from growing up as a young man on the foot of Mount Cameroon, whether I was born in Limbe, Victoria, growing up in Mutengene, going to secondary school in Bamenda, coming from a family in Kwen. Nobody would know that 33 years after, you'll be in Buckingham Palace. That wasn't the expectation. Nobody would expect that Emmanuel Sutebu would be a medical practitioner in the Middle East today. But growing up, during the formative years, our parents gave us the right values in our upbringing, our culture, our schools, our training, instilled the right values on us: belief, hard work, resilience, prayerful life. And we've been guided by those fundamental values now to propel us, to drive us to the level of international and global recognition across the world today.
Thank you. You have been, it's so easy to interview you because you just tell the story, and you've taken us through your life story, personal and professional. And thank you also for sharing some of the things you've been very vulnerable, and you've shared your personal stories with the people who are listening, and I really appreciate that. You've shared with us fundamentals of turning a struggle into success, the importance of learning and being adaptive, the importance also of being calm, keeping calm when you're faced with a struggle. And it's really inspiring where you've come from and your journey from Bamenda. And we went to the same secondary school, and the experience of life at a young age, struggling with fees, and then where you are now, as you said, receiving a very prestigious award from His Majesty King Charles III. So really, really inspiring. I want to, if you don't mind, turn a bit and change tact and just talk a bit about the work you do, because you work across continents, across Africa, but also between Africa and also the Caribbeans. And that scale of work involves developing a lot of relationships. And in dealing with a struggle, you also have to have people around you. And you are somebody, when we watch the work you do, you are so good at developing relationships. So I wonder if you could share how you do that and how that helps you also when you're faced with a struggle.
So relationship building, first of all, is very critical to everything you do. You need to understand your stakeholders, manage them, and leave them, So your network, your relationship base is very critical. And it's just like you have a plant in your house. If you have a plant, you need to provide that plant with air, with water, for it to live. That's how your relationships are. If you want to get the best out there, you need to manage your relationships. Throughout my life, I have had the opportunity to interact at different levels with people. I'm very versatile. I work with people from all walks and levels of life, all diversities, all cultures. This morning I've had a meeting with an Emirati. I've had a meeting with Lebanese and his son. I had a meeting with a lady from South Sudan. That's the kind of diversity. That's the kind of relationship level. But then why relationships? Because they are very important. So for me, I think my relationships are my competitive advantage. The management of relationships to me is very important. And I've applied that in the work I do, coming from a very young age where I was in an opposition newspaper, working with people at high level in government, at opposition and government, going into a diplomatic international organization, going into an international bank, going into a Pan-African bank, and ending in a Pan-African development organization. I've built diverse levels of relationships across, be it the doorman of my apartment to the private secretary of a head of state, or the head of state, or a minister, or a governor of central bank, or your doctor, or your lawyer. You have to manage those relationships. And relationships, even in your own house, you need to manage those stakeholders in your house. You want to go on holiday, you have a little budget, who are the challenging people in your house that you need to deal with, your child, your wife, you need to understand them to be able to manage those relationships. It comes with a lot of experience over the years. Relationships, you build them at infant stage, you grow them, they mature, and then you exploit them for your own benefit, those relationships. And the work I do in Africa, with Afreximbank, is not just the typical work of a bank. The work we do, we see ourselves as economic freedom fighters. We see ourselves as mandated lead arrangers for the emancipation and the development of the African continent. If someone else can do that, fine. What is the additionality that we bring to the table as we use money as an instrument of change and transformation on the African continent? That is our mantra. The work we do, the bank was created like 30 years ago by our founding fathers who had a vision to set up a Pan-African banking institution to use trade, to work in trade and trade-related infrastructure. Pan-African owned, Pan-African managed, Pan-African run business to support the development of the continent. And as I say, we are not a typical bank. We are not your typical high street bank. We're a different kind of public sector, private sector institution. And I want to give you an example of how we make strategic impact. Every time when things fail on the continent, that's where we are relevant. Our relevance is demonstrated. During the Ukraine crisis, the Eastern crisis in Eastern Europe, supply chain disruptions, all what was being imported from Eastern Europe to Africa, whether that grain, petroleum products, no vessels, high inflation, high cost of goods. We put in place what we call the Ukraine Adjustment Facility to support African governments, which I ran. And I can tell you, I think today we've supported more than $12 billion to African countries. When COVID-19 broke out and Africans couldn't have access to therapeutics, PPPs, or PPEs, or get access to vaccines, the bank took two significant initiatives. One was to set up the African Medical Supplies Platform to procure those necessary basic things like masks, for the continent. What still was the vaccine, access to vaccines that was not available to African countries and Caribbean countries. We aggregated the need for vaccines for the Africans and Caribbeans and negotiated with the vaccine manufacturers to be able to supply vaccines to our continent and to Black people in the Caribbean, and using money and our negotiating power, something which could not have been done individually or independently by any of the 55 countries. That's why I say we use money as an instrument for change. But those were loans made to those countries to procure those vaccines.
Wow.
And how do we empower Africans to take their own future and destiny into their own hands? As part of our mandate to promote intra-African trade, investments, promote trade and development, we try to empower African businessmen and women. We try to support African businesses, whether they call intra-African champions, whether by financing them, whether by facilitating and twinning them. You have people in Cameroon who are producing things that people need in Nigeria. They don't know. That's why we are having a trade fair in Cairo between the 9th and the 15th of November, the Intra-African Trade Fair. This is the third time we're organizing it. Organized it in Cairo once and in Durban in South Africa. Very successful marketplace that brings Africans together. And this is the only way we can educate one another and take advantage of our future. So we're not a typical bank. The work we do is not a typical what you see in an international commercial bank, because we're a policy bank, we're a mandate bank, and we have a certain DNA which is around Pan-Africanism. We have a certain DNA which is around promotion of intra-African trade.
You've mentioned about how you're promoting Pan-African trade, and you've achieved things that people would have said you can't do. It's not achievable. How do you get people to trust in what you're trying to do? And how do you get people to commit and help bring about the change that you're describing?
You're very right. It's very difficult to achieve that, but you only achieve that by leadership. We're fortunate to have a visionary leader in our president, Professor Rama, who's been running the bank for the last 8 to 9 years. Under his leadership, we all emulate the leadership of can do and will do. We have that can do attitude. If anything is possible, it can be done. We will do it. So we fold our sleeves and we take the lead. I can give you an example where last week Friday, actually, I got back from a very long trip, was tired, and I was sleeping. And I woke up and saw a message that I had to chair a meeting at 9:30 in the morning. And I braced myself for that. I went to chair the meeting. And one of my colleagues who had traveled with me, but on a lesser route, less difficult route, he said to me on the call, "Oh, I'm tired." And I traveled. And somebody said to him that you're not alone. A lot more people here travel. So you have to follow your sleeves and do it. So we lead by example. And each time we said we're going to do something, we have done it. Each time we say we're going to do something, we've done it. We say we're going to build refineries in Africa. We're building refineries in Africa. We say we're going to build centers of excellence in Africa. We're building centers of excellence in Africa. We say we're going to promote inter-African trade. We are promoting inter-African trade. We put our money where our mouth is.
Right.
We say we're going to go to the Caribbean and set up an office. We opened an office in Caribbean on the 1st of August. We say we're going to make loans there. We made the first loan to St. Lucia in Caribbean to rebuild a school that was destroyed by a hurricane. That is the kind of impact and transformation that we bring to people's life using money as an instrument of change.
Right. So your achievements and what you do, your actions, build trust, and you lead by example. Really, really powerful. One of the things that you have mentioned, and it's pretty obvious, is that you are an inspiration for younger people who are aspiring to do similar things. Now, how do you've come up with quite big, and some would say even frightening objectives in terms of trade within Africa and also across continents. So how do you come up with a vision that is so clear as you're describing there? How do you do that?
See, Dr. Emmanuel, we come from very humble beginnings, okay? But fortunately, we are in a position to make change and a position to influence. And we have to do that. Because if we do not do these things, if we do not make that meaningful impact and change in our own communities, nobody else will do it for us. What you need to know is that China was not developed by Americans. China was developed by Chinese. America was not developed by Indians. America was developed by Americans. Europe was not developed by third parties. It was developed by Europeans. We have to take our destiny into our hands. We can work with partners across the world, but the onus of our transformation, our development lies with us. We need to start from somewhere in our families, in our communities, in our positions. We need to make that change. We need to strive for the best every day to make that change. And that is how together we are going to achieve the development of the continent. I see a lot of people passing the buck or putting the responsibility on somebody else. We have the skills in Africa to build hospitals, to build roads, to build bridges. Why are we always dependent on third parties? We've got the resources, natural resources, we've got the talent, we've got the wealth. We have to take our own destiny in our hands to make that transformation as Africans. And that's what we do at the Africa Export Import Bank.
A lot of food for thought for people across Africa and Africans in the diaspora, and really, really profound. So thank you for sharing that. I wonder whether you could also, you've highlighted quite beautifully with your journey, personal and professional. You highlighted the struggles that you've gone through and how you've used them to change struggles to success. And it looks as if every door that is closed, you've opened another door, and it's taken you to a bigger place. And that's the journey we've seen with your career, as well as even the personal challenges that you've overcome. And so I wonder whether you, as we come to conclude this episode, whether you could share one do and one do not when you're faced with a struggle, either personal or professionally. One thing you should do and one thing you should not do.
First of all, I see myself as a role model for a lot of young men and women. And one message I said to them, first of all, is you have to first believe in yourself. Everything is possible with you. You have to work hard. There's no free lunch. You have to be resilient to change. You have to adapt to your environment. You have to learn your environment. You have to learn from your mistakes and from your experiences. And the sky is the limit. One thing you shouldn't do not give up. Don't think that it is rosy everywhere just because you saw it. It is not rosy. Every successful person has gone through several challenges. And your challenges are just a window of opportunity, are just a stepping stone to the next bright valley. So do not discourage yourself. It's not the end of the world. God has given you the talent of good health, of life. And using that, you can make a meaningful difference to yourself, to your community, to your country. So this is a clarion call for young men and women to work hard, to believe in themselves, first of all, to work hard. Only through that hard work can you gain success. There are no free lunch. I haven't got a godfather. I haven't got a parent. I've never had one. I've never gone through a process and I've been favored. I come from a diverse background, Black heritage, from Cameroon, from Bamenda. How on earth would I have known 33 years ago when I first went to the UK that in 2023 I would be at Buckingham Palace? No, doesn't come. It's not a gift. Nobody owes us anything. You have to earn everything. You have to work hard to earn it. And it's possible, guys. It's very possible. We have to also work together as teams collectively. I see a lot of silos, but we are endowed with a lot of richness, a lot of wealth, a lot of knowledge, but we don't align, don't work together as a team. Thank you.
Thank you. So inspirational and very profound conversation we've had. I've taken a lot from the conversation, a lot of inspiration. I've also watched you tell the stories, things you've gone through, and it's really uplifting and fascinating where you were and where you are now. And I leave also with a few words. First, recognizing that you are a Pan-Africanist. And as you, in your own words, you said it, and I always remember that phrase, an economic freedom fighter for Africa. And you use money to make change and change lives and save lives, as you also demonstrated with the work that you did with African Bank during the COVID pandemic. You are truly a role model for Black people around the world and in Africa. Young men and women, or Black Africans, Caribbeans, and Americans that are aspiring, and I'm sure they would have learned a lot of different things from this podcast. So once more, thank you for giving up your time to share your experience of turning struggles into success, to demonstrate your skill, which you've learned right from childhood, and you've grown and developed it, and now you do it second nature, and we can see that from what you've managed to achieve. And so before I close, I wanted to give you the opportunity maybe to say the last word before I close the podcast.
No, thank you again for inviting me to this podcast, and congratulations for this initiative, which I think is good. I think I owe a legacy to our community, which is to actually document my history through a book. And I hope that as I'm winding down, I will have the time to be able to put my memoirs, my experience, my lessons, my mistakes, my path together, which can be used for informative, educational, and entertainment purposes, because it's a lot of fun also that has been in my journey. And we can display this through maybe universities and opportunities for people across not only Cameroon but the entire African continent to learn how to also improve themselves. So thank you for this opportunity, and I think this podcast is the beginning of this journey.
Thank you. Thank you for giving up your time to share. And we are, all of us listening here, myself and the other people listening who listen to this podcast, will hold you to account, because we'll all be waiting for that book, because you have a lot to share that people would benefit from. And we really look forward to future success. As one door closes for you, another door opens. And so we know this is just the beginning, and we really look forward to success. So thank you, really special. And those who are listening would not also realize, and I'm announce it now, that we also had a struggle on this episode, as we recorded and we had to re-record, and it was also a good demonstration live of turning a struggle into success, and we've just done that together. So thank you for going on that journey again with me. And on that, I would like to say to all the listeners of the podcast, if you've enjoyed this, please do follow the podcast, like the podcast, and share. You may change somebody's life. The lessons you've just heard today are life-changing, and somebody can benefit from it. So share the podcast widely. Thanks to all of you for listening, and we'll see you on the next podcast. And I'll also put some information in the description of the podcast of how you can get in touch with Mr. René Awambeng if you have any further queries or want to get in touch and discuss anything further. So once more, thank you, and we'll see you at the next episode.
I'm going up high to reach the sky. No one can tell me no. I'm gonna be eagle. I'm gonna show